And welcome to a special Final Four edition of the Upstate Orange Podcast. The Cuse is in the house. It's Thursday, April 4th, 2013, and we're coming at you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York. The Orange is back in the Final Four and down in Atlanta prepping for Michigan on Saturday night. We'll recap Syracuse's tournament run so far, preview the big matchup on Saturday night, try our hand at some Final Four trivia, and much, much more. I'm Jim Sinicropi, and I'm joined tonight via telephone by our resident college hoops guru, Brad Connor.
Hey, Jim.
Brad, sure is great to be doing the show tonight with the Orange in the Final Four. I
can't say I actually expected to be doing this show in this anticipation, but I'm happy to be here.
Now, Brad, in 1987, we watched Syracuse beat North Carolina together.
Oh, man, it's one of my sweetest Syracuse memories I have.
Yep, taking down J.R. Reed and company. So, also in studio tonight, I'm pleased to welcome back the mouth of the South and one of the voices of FingerLakes1.com sports, Mr. David Barnick.
It's great to be back, and hello, Brad, and so happy that the Orangemen are in the Final Four, and we hope they've got a couple more steps to finish.
It's been a great week, hasn't it? You know, just I love the week, you know, once they qualify and are in, and the whole week leading up to it just doesn't get any better.
I've overpaid for a Syracuse Final Four T-shirt and then overpaid the United States Postal Service so it gets to California on Friday for my son to wear.
Oh, nice. Yeah, T-shirt sales are at an all-time high right now in Syracuse.
Out guys for a national championship T-shirt personally.
Yeah, I'm holding out for that national championship T-shirt too. You'll notice my regular co-host Matt Verke not with us tonight. He's on the road heading home from Myrtle Beach with his family, and so he'll be back for our final show, which will probably be next Thursday night after Syracuse wins the national title. So we're going to talk about all this stuff over the next half hour. We're going to have some great trivia, as I mentioned, and also alongside is our producer Jeremy Hunt in the booth running the board tonight. The Upstate Orange Podcast is brought to you by Madej Miris and Ricky, your hometown personal injury attorneys. If you've been injured and deserve compensation, call the Finger Lakes Personal Injury Hotline at 315-568-0911. And also by Generations Bank, generations of service for over 140 years. Visit them online at mygenbank.com and check out their new mobile banking app. And Newark Pilots Baseball, it's April, and season ticket packages now available for the 2013 season at Colburn Park. Visit newarkpilots.com for more information. Fellas, before we start out, I want to kind of give a little backdrop of my past week. I was down in Disney World, or Disneyland, which was the one in Florida?
Disney World.
Disney World. I was down in Disney World and with the family, and I got to watch the semis with my dad in the hotel room, also a Syracuse grad, and so that was kind of nice getting to watch that with my dad. And the reason I bring it all up is for the next several days of my vacation, as I wandered around the theme parks with my Syracuse gear on, at least once every 10 to 15 minutes I'd see someone else with a Syracuse gear on, or someone would see me and say, "Go Syracuse," or "Let's go Orange," or "Cuse is in the house." And, and I would say that to them, and I can't tell you what a great feeling that is. And it was really a fun way to enjoy, Syracuse qualifying for the Final Four, was to be down in Disney World with these thousands of other people from all over America, representing Syracuse and having so many people take note of it. And it was also interesting that there was a lot of Michigan shirts too. And, so I would see them and say, "See you on Saturday, see you in Atlanta." And so that was kind of fun. I didn't see any Duke shirts. I saw one Duke shirt, and it was in a designated smoking area in Disney. And it was an old crotchety guy. And I said, and this was before they played their game with Louisville. And I said to the guy, "What do you think about the game tomorrow night?" And he looked at me like I was crazy. So I don't even think he was a Duke fan. one other interesting thing is, more than anything,
He just had come off Tobacco Road, obviously.
I guess so. So the only thing, Syracuse was the most gear I saw out and about, which really says something. Michigan was probably second. Then it was Louisville, Michigan State was up there. But the one logo and one team that I saw the most hats and shirts of was the Detroit Tigers. And I thought that was strange. So the Detroit school system must have been on spring break, or something, because I found that a lot of Detroit Tigers gear. But
The same people weren't wearing Michigan sweatshirts.
yeah, right. That's the other thing. I'm thinking that these should be Michigan fans too. So, and I also talked to some people, ACC fans, and they to the last one, I talked to an NC State fan, a Wake fan, a Virginia fan. They all were glad that we were coming. Syracuse was coming. They were excited about it. So I told them I wasn't so excited, but they were excited. They thought Syracuse was a good choice, and they also all said that they wanted, look forward to us helping break up the Tobacco Road
Domination,
not only on the court but in the meeting room. So that's interesting. That was something that they would take note of and say, because it bothers them, especially the NC State fan and the Virginia fan.
kind of an interesting name for the new Big East Conference. Did you catch that?
The American Athletic Conference, the
So
AAC.
Right, right.
Which is kind of strange, but so we'll have to look forward to that SMU UConn final maybe next year. But Brad, you watched the semifinal game, or the regional championship game, I should say, in which we defeated Marquette on the road as well. You were in Georgia, and tell us about that experience.
I was in a Buffalo Wild Wings in Valdosta, Georgia, en route from Gulf Coast of Florida back to Cincinnati, and had mapped it out so we could find a good place, the sports bar that I know have it on, and have some friendly televisions. And there were probably 15, 20 tables filled in there at, what time was that game? It was mid-afternoon.
4:30 game, I think.
Dinner time. And of those maybe 10 or 15 tables, there were at least 5 tables of Syracuse fans. The Buffalo Wild Wings in Valdosta, Georgia. I don't know if they were just like me and headed to or from Florida and stopped off on their way to watch the game, or if they were truly Syracuse fans in Valdosta, Georgia. I have no idea. But there was one table of Marquette fans, but it was a decidedly Syracuse partisan crowd inside the Buffalo Wild Wings, which was shocking to me. I figured we'd just watch the game in peace and quiet, and come to find them in friendly territory.
Now, is Syracuse America's team, America's college team? I mean, that's what it felt like to me down in Disney. Of course, maybe it's because we had won and we're in the Final Four, but it was literally every 10 to 15 minutes walking through the crowds, and I'd get off a ride, and one of the girls working the exit gate would say, "Go Syracuse," and I'm like, wow. It felt really good, and we always fill opposing arenas.
A lot of orange at the Verizon Center.
Yeah.
That was pretty impressive.
And you were in Washington,
I
D.C.,
was.
Dave, but not at the game, right?
Yeah, I thought about it because I've been told a lot of times for the teams that lose the first round games there,
Yeah, easy to
their
get tickets.
people vacate and are happy to get whatever they can for the tickets. But I had my Syracuse gear on all Easter weekend, that's for sure.
Yeah, it feels good. Feels good to be so happy to put it on in April.
I can tell you guys, still headed through Georgia. We stopped at the Georgia Dome to give it a quick blessing on the way up through. I wanted to stay for the week, but it was a little too early on Monday or on Sunday to stick around.
Yeah, I saw that picture. Was that much of a detour for you?
No, we went right through Atlanta, so it was 2 or 3 minutes off the highway was all. There was nothing going on around it. They were still painting logos on the sidewalks and putting banners up on the side of the dome. I mean, it was almost as if they just realized they had a Final Four and they'd better get their acting gear.
Well, let's get right to it. I think we sat here a few weeks ago, and Dave, I know you were in studio on the Weber on Sports show, and we were previewing the Indiana matchup, and I felt really good about it, and I guess I know what I was talking about because we rolled over Indiana. I mean, it wasn't even close.
It's like they cuffed him around like a younger brother or something. It was most impressive, and I thought for whatever esteem in the minds of many experts that Boeheim may have been lacking. Not that he should have, in my opinion, but he certainly gained additional credits, so to speak, with his team's performance in that game. Just frankly, I thought they dominated Indiana.
And it was against a team that everybody thought was the best team in the country. They're talking about Indiana-Louisville is a likely final, and Indiana was the number 2 overall seed in the tournament. Brad, is that correct?
I think that's right, yeah.
And, then we just roll over them, and then they're forgotten. They're done. But I think people forget, they start saying, Indiana wasn't that good after all. They're thinking, but they were. But Syracuse's defense is that good. So that was a great sign. But like I said, I was comfortable with that game. I really thought we were going to win that game. It was the Marquette game I was worried about. And lo and behold, we rolled right over Marquette.
Well, what I'm hoping, this trend of Syracuse exercising their demons for this season has one team left to do that to, and that would be Louisville in the finals. That's what I'm hoping for.
That would be so great.
I certainly didn't expect this edition of the Syracuse Orangemen to advance, but I'm enjoying every moment of it.
It's a huge credit to Boeheim, and I want to talk about that specifically a little later. But first I want to take a look at the matchup on Saturday against Michigan, because I got to tell you right away, I feel really good about this matchup too. And there's a lot of reasons I feel that way. And I think the best way to illustrate why I feel that way is to explain a video I watched earlier this week. It was called 3 Reasons Why Michigan Will Beat Syracuse. And it was Dan Rubenstein of SB Nation. It's the same organization that the flag that newsmagician.com is under, Sports Blog Nation. So 3 reasons why Michigan will beat Syracuse. And as I watched it, he gave every reason he gave. You could have taken out Michigan or the Michigan players and inserted Indiana or the Indiana players. For instance, reason number 1. The Michigan backcourt will shoot over Syracuse zone, and Trey Burke is probably the best player in college basketball. Now, you substitute Trey Burke for Oladipo. That's what everybody said before Indiana. And let's also remember that we also shut down the Pac-10 Player of the Year, and we shut down one of the darlings of the tournament in Vander Blue for Marquette. And as far as them thinking that they're going to shoot over the Syracuse zone, a 6'6" point guard and a 6'4" Brandon Trish, that's something that somebody that really hasn't watched Syracuse too closely would say, and our wings on the baseline. So that's point 1. Point 2 he made was the emergence of Mitch McGary, because having a strong big man is key to beating the zone and key to getting offensive rebounds, which the zone is vulnerable to, which you can substitute Mitch McGary with Cody Zeller. That's what they were saying before the Indiana game, exactly. And then finally, they say, reason number 3, Syracuse's offense will go cold against a great Michigan defense. And that's what they were saying about Indiana, that we wouldn't be able to handle that tough man-to-man Big Ten defense, and that we were going to be thwarted because we were so streaky. And the interesting thing is Trish and Sutherland, haven't had big games. And Carter Williams had a nice game against Indiana, didn't score as much against Marquette. But just wait till Trish or Sutherland has a big game, because they're both due. So those are the reasons I think that we're gonna win. There's the exact same type of things they were saying about Indiana. People who say these things just haven't been paying attention to how dominant our defense has been. And what do you think about our defense, Brad? Is it like the best defensive performance ever in a tournament so far?
I think I sent a text to both you and Verk right after that Marquette game, and I said I don't think that I've ever seen a better Syracuse zone defense. And they've spent a lot of time this week talking about the zone, and a lot of the articles you read, which it's all regurgitation of things that most of us already know, but talking about how Boeheim has committed himself in the last 3 years significantly more to the zone than he ever did before, and we all know how dominant the zone was in the past, but that they don't even spend a minute working on a man defense at all, that it's all zone. And you can tell what the effect of that is and how well that team is working together, how much they move in sync. I saw a great clip, ESPN or something, that showed they were drawing circles around all of the players almost with string tied between them, and it just showed how this kind of amoeba zone defense just shifts, and it shifts in tandem, and it's almost as if they're doing a synchronized dance. It was remarkable to see, and you sort of know it's happening but I didn't realize it to that degree until I saw this visual, and it's clear that these guys are just as in sync as any zone defense we've seen from this team.
And you're right, it's odd, and the amoeba is a great reference. It's almost, you don't want to call it a 2-3 because once the possession begins, it doesn't become a 2-3. But the interesting thing, to me, is the intensity and the fact that as an offensive player going against the Syracuse zone, is you think you caught a break, you pump fake and somebody jumped for it, and you're by them, and you're thinking, okay, and then there's two more guys in your face, so you look to pass, but those guys are covered. So it doesn't make sense. It seems like there's 7 guys on the court instead of 5. And Dave, I know that we got to give credit to Jim Boeheim for his basketball genius to have the guts to commit to the 2-3 zone at a big-time college basketball program, to say this is what we're doing because I believe that this is the way to win in today's game.
Well, Jay Billis has been calling Boeheim perhaps the smartest. He talks about how intelligent he is, and maybe the smartest guy in college basketball. And Brad would agree with Coach Boeheim too, who's saying he thinks perhaps his best defensive team ever. And what Buzz Williams said, and Coach Beilein of Michigan has echoed, it's not the 2-3 zone, it's the players playing that zone,
right,
with the size and length and commitment that they have demonstrated.
And knowledge of the way that Coach Boeheim wants them to play it. You won't see, for instance, Baylor plays the 2-3 zone a lot. I watch Baylor play it. I watch a lot of different teams play it. More teams are playing it. But when I watch another team play the 2-3 zone, it's totally not the same. And as a Syracuse fan, I almost watch a rotation that they make and say, no, that's wrong. That's not the way you're supposed to do it. That's, the way that the high school team's taught to do it, not the way that Boeheim teaches it. And so as a fan, we really get to appreciate, the shifts and the positioning and the assignments that take place in the zone. And unless you're watching it every day, I don't think you really appreciate, how almost impossible it is to get a decent shot off, an uncontested shot off against that defense.
With their wingspan for those guards specifically, I think another big key when Sutherland hit those threes against Seton Hall and basically took all the cobwebs from his suspension off of him. Mm-hmm. And I think that led to improved offensive performance, and the defense perhaps feeds a little bit off the offense picking it up a little bit and vice versa. And it's just a real nice, enjoyable role for the Orangemen. And we wouldn't have been surprised about this maybe in early January, mid-January,
right,
especially when they went on the road at Louisville. But given the swoon that they had demonstrated and almost some unwatchable games, twice against Georgetown, it was I did not believe this was going to happen, but again, I'm overjoyed that it is. And why not 2 more?
Oh, please let it happen, please. I early in the year, but going way back to November even, on this show, I said this is the best team in the country, and we used during the regular season we do our top 5 power rankings, and even after Syracuse lost to Temple, I still had them number 1 in my power rankings, and Brandon Verk had dropped them. I said I really think these guys are the best team in the country. I know they lost a game, but look at the pieces. Michael Carter-Williams is a stud, I said. We're big in the zone. These are all things I said. And I didn't believe them anymore by the end of February when we went on that streak. I didn't think Michael Carter-Williams had what it takes to lead the team or to make the good decisions. And really, that was the primary thing with me was Michael Carter-Williams. And he certainly has turned it around. I think the losing streak, Brad, is the thing that made Michael Carter-Williams realize, geez, this isn't too much fun. Let me try it Coach Boeheim's way and try to do some of these things he's been saying, and he shot less He shot a lot during the Indiana game. He scored a lot during the Indiana game. But if it's not there, he's shooting less. He's looking for his teammates more, and he's just made a much more concerted effort on getting out on shooters, which was something he didn't do as well during that losing streak. So do you see that too, Brad? Is it Michael Carter-Williams a big difference? Because I haven't seen Trish really do anything special, or Sutherland.
Well, I think I've seen a different energy level from Michael Carter-Williams since the Big East tournament since the Seton Hall game, like Dave referenced. It's the energy, and Dave even said it too. The defense feeds the offense. You get a steal, and there's a bit more of a skip to the step a little bit, and there's more energy to get out onto the shooters, and then then he translates to the other side of the court, and he's getting into the lane. And you mentioned Jim, where he's not looking for his outside shot nearly as much as he was early in the season, mid-season. Ever since the Big East tournament, really, Boeheim's done a great job of getting these guys to buy into their roles and explaining to them and finally getting it through their heads of this is what it's going to take to be successful. We're not going to be successful if we've got four guys standing outside the three-point arc. We need Brandon Trish. You have to get into the lane, use that size you have to body down the smaller defender. Michael Carter-Williams, you've got to get to the basket. You're faster. You can beat your guys off the dribble. Sutherland, you're the three-point experts. CJ, get the mid-range game. Keita, clean up whatever you need. Christmas, same. I think they were probably trying to do too much when it came to that losing streak, and guys were maybe trying to shoot themselves out of it. And all of a sudden, it's like a switch flipped in all of them, and it's. And I don't know how much of that is Boeheim drilling it into them, or the urgency of the postseason and potentially letting expectations. I don't know what it was, but I mean, this is a different team than we saw a month ago. We can all agree to that.
And Coach Boeheim would agree as well, saying the great turnaround his team has demonstrated. And one guy that needs mentioning at some point tonight, the underrated, unsung but greatly improved Keita, Musa Keita. Yeah. At the foul line, of course, and of course he still has hands of stone offensively, but what a defensive presence, and they're going to need him and the other big guys inside against Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that was kind of strange to me is, Keita has been fantastic this postseason, but he wasn't Christmas played the whole game against Marquette, which was kind of odd, and I don't necessarily think Christmas played that great. I think he played good defense against Marquette and got some rebounds. But what's your take on that, Brad?
What did Boeheim say? In our offense, if the center spot you couldn't get 8 points out of it, you might as well be dead or something. He was
earlier in the year,
the Indiana game or the Cal game, but they I think if they can get 10 points from the center spot, that's asking probably plenty of those guys. But the energy that Keita brings, and I think he's been the key to a lot of the defensive success. And Christmas, I'm not sure, still makes more mistakes in the zone than Keita does. Keita's in the right place at the right time. He brings the energy. He talks. He's a quarterback back there, and that's the key to a lot of what happens. Is you need that guy who's a communicator at the back line to let guys know where there's cutters, where there's open spots. And I think he's probably bringing more than Christmas when it comes to that. But I think he's really the X factor, and certainly not from an offensive standpoint, but he really is the engine that drives the defense, in my opinion. And the more time that Keita's on the court, I think the better the zone becomes. And he's not going to get 35 minutes too often. But I'm almost disappointed when I see him leave and Christmas come in. Not because I don't think Christmas can do it, but I just think Keita brings so much to that backside defense.
Sure, and I want to look ahead to maybe a potential Monday final against Louisville, although it makes me nervous to talk too much about that, with one game to go. But I want to talk right now before we take our quick commercial break about this Michigan game. I want to find out what you guys honestly think, your predictions. I gave you my prediction. We're going to win, and I think it's going to be about a 12-point to 15-point win.
Well, I'm almost afraid to pick Syracuse since they've been successful. I had them on my brackets winning 2 games and then losing in the Sweet 16. And even, a lot of people were saying they might lose the first. Seth Davis hasn't been talking about the
yeah.
Montana Grizzlies much, has he? But I think certainly they're capable. Listen, for those of us that remember Georgetown losing to Villanova in that classic upset of all upsets, Syracuse winning certainly would be far less of an upset. And they already know. I don't think Rick Pitino would be eager to face the Orangemen again.
No.
And I think if they get by Michigan, and it's a toss-up game.
Yeah, a 50-50 game, that Louisville
As
game.
good as Louisville's playing, they deserve to be the favorites, but I wouldn't count out the Orange.
How about you, Brad? Michigan game, and then potentially, what's next?
When Michigan beat Florida, Michigan looked really good in that game.
Sure.
But I still felt very, very confident about Syracuse's chances against Michigan. And as the week's gone on, I don't know if it's just been the fact that virtually every media person that I've read has said Michigan will beat Syracuse, and I guess it's put a little bit of doubt in my mind. But I don't. I look at it exactly the way you look at it, Jim. That the way Michigan is structured and the way they'll attack a team like Syracuse that they've not seen all season, I don't see too many differences, really. I think there's a lot of similarities. All of a sudden, Trey Burke's the greatest player to ever walk a basketball court, when 2 weeks ago that guy was Victor Oladipo, and you saw what happened to him. I'd never heard of Mitch McGarry until 2 weeks ago, and now he's the greatest forward in the game. I mean, where does this come from? It's this media hype, and the one guy that I've seen that's leaning towards Syracuse now is Doug Gottlieb, and say what you will about him, but I do respect his ability to analyze and break down a game, and he's raised a lot of good points as to why Syracuse will win this game, and I'd agree with most of it. I mean, I think Syracuse, a good defense beats a good offense, and that holds true in most any sport. And I think in this game, I think that's where it'll come down to. I think Syracuse will score enough points. I think they'll shut Michigan down in the same way they did with Indiana and with Marquette, and I expect I'm not going to say 15 points like you, but I'd say probably 6 to 8.
Yeah, and let's remember, this is a Michigan team that lost to Penn State this year.
Syracuse has no bad losses like that.
Yeah,
None.
yeah.
In fact, the Temple loss doesn't look nearly as bad as they could have easily defeated Indiana, and they have quite a player in their own right. But the one game in the most recent slew of games that struck me the most, I was on the phone flicking games back and forth thinking, wow, this game is over. Kansas has dominated Michigan and is moving on. And the next thing, I flipped it back again, and
wait a second.
Michigan emerged, and that was a really bad loss for Kansas.
Yeah, and Burke had to hit that deep shot even, to tie it. So there are everybody's really high on Michigan, but they had no business winning,
They were a bad team for about 35 minutes of that game.
And Kansas had control of the game, and that auditorium got pretty quiet because it was filled with Jayhawk fans to talk about the home court advantage.
And a couple more things before we take our break on why I think Syracuse is going to win this game. Michigan lost to Indiana twice this year. They were both close games, but they lost. They lost at home and they lost in Bloomington. And Boeheim's 9-0 against John Beilein. I mean, that's 9-0. So you might think, well, Beilein's due, but they've done this 9 times before, and Boeheim's won 9 times. And this wasn't when Beilein was at Lemoyne. This is when he was a fellow competitor with great West Virginia teams in the Big East.
Heard a great Beilein interview driving home from Washington, and most people know that it was Boeheim's reference that helped land him his first Division I job, I think, at Canisius. Yep. And Beilein was most complimentary, saying that Coach Boeheim would not ever take credit for it, but I don't think I would have got that job without him. But the other thing he said, and this is a guy, of course, who lives, eats, breathes basketball, Jim Boeheim, that on several occasions while Beilein was coaching Lemoyne, on off nights for Syracuse, Boeheim would just show up at a game. Mm-hmm. And he said he was so grateful for the way he always was hospitable to his wife and children anytime
He also
came
said he
across
didn't
them.
call for tickets either. He didn't like call Beeline's up or his office and say, I need tickets for the game. You know, he would just kind of show up. I don't think those Lemoyne games sold out
So,
often.
there's that other side of Coach Boeheim.
Yeah.
We see and hear, he can be a pretty surly guy, no doubt. But given the media attention from all corners, I would show some wisdom also, being insulated as much as possible.
And I think we here in upstate New York kind of can understand that. That's kind of a way a lot of people are in upstate New York. They, aren't so interested with all the extracurricular activity. They just want to take care of the business at hand, I suppose. And Julie Boeheim, in an interview, actually said, people don't realize it, but everything bad that happens to this program, anything negative, it kills Boeheim. It like tears his heart out. He doesn't show it, to the media, but this is coming from, his wife.
Well, there's also not a lot of diversity for Central New Yorkers during the winter time. Syracuse basketball, because of its success, means so much to so many here.
And Boeheim, I'm sure, understands that as well. And so there's a lot of pressure on the guy to maintain, a private university here in upstate New York is among the nation's elite basketball programs. And, God bless him. He's been able to do it.
A trio, I think, of other coaches now to have made the Final Four in 4 different decades.
Yeah, it's
Krzyzewski, Pitino, and I forget who the fourth one is. But
Smith, I believe.
Dean, is it Smith or is it someone else? Are you sure about that, Bram?
I'm not positive. I remember seeing the graphic in the game. Game last week.
Although I'm almost a little hesitant to be as complimentary as I've already been, because I don't want to upset the apple cart.
That's right.
A little superstitious. I just want to keep marching forward.
Me too. In 2003, as our producer Jeremy Hunt will remember, he was over the first game of the tournament that year against Montana State. I made ribs and beans. I made the ribs and beans because I wanted some ribs and beans for the game, and I think Jeremy was there and we ate them. And my wife to be, my fiance at the time, I think, was also there. And so the next game, second round game against not Oklahoma State. Who was that second round game? Was it Oklahoma State?
Or Texas, maybe.
No, it was Oklahoma State. We were down big in that game. I had leftover ribs and beans because it was only 2 games later, so I warmed them up and made them. And they come back and win the game. And, of course, producer Jeremy Hunt was there with me at that game too. So now we're moving on. I called up Jeremy. I said, you're coming over. We're having ribs and beans. Win that game. Win the next game to advance to the Final Four. Coming over to watch the game, I'm making ribs and beans. And so we had, barbecue ribs and beans every single game.
Wade Boggs always ate chicken on game days, right? Same thing.
And then I think we fast forward to the next year, which was Vermont, I believe. I made ribs and beans, and the streak was broken. I guess too much time had passed. But so no more ribs and beans. But that 2003, I'll always remember it as the year I ate a lot of ribs and beans.
The other parallel for me with this year's team is, and I mentioned this to you, I think, when we did the Weber show a week or so ago, is a friend of mine took me to a game some years ago at the Dome, and Syracuse was thumped by Pittsburgh. And I said, this Syracuse team, they're just not that good. They're not going to do anything this year. Well, that was the Derek Coleman freshman year that they lost in Indiana in the finals.
Yeah.
In a game they really should have won. So,
Cycli, Douglas, and Coleman.
Stevie Thompson, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Billy Owens.
And that's a good point you guys, Dave, you just raised. It seems like this team always does their best when you least expect it. The year after, you think they're going to do great things. Last season they were number 1 in the country for a stretch, and should have gone deeper if they'd had Fab Melo all season. In '87, they just lost Pearl Washington, Raphael Addison, Wendell Alexis. The expectations were low, and they go to the finals and easily could have won. And in 2003, they were full of freshmen, and that wasn't supposed to be their year. And
we lost Moten in '95.
Yeah.
The all-time leading scorer, and then go to the Final Four in '96.
Right. So it seems every year after being kind of let down the prior year, they somehow are able to far exceed expectations, and I think we've seen the same this year. And keep going.
Yeah, and Coach Boeheim had said some thoughts I had that 2 of the last 3 years they could have made it to and won the whole thing. He felt a little unlucky about that,
Absolutely.
and hopefully that the luck will balance out
Karma.
as this team emerges.
Yeah, a couple other reasons, too, before we take that break, why I think Syracuse is going to be Michigan. Bam's 3-0 in national semifinals, so obviously, in a big game, when he's given the time to come up with a game plan, he's been successful against, one of the top teams in the country in those years. I don't see it being any different on Saturday. Our intensity level is going to be high, and that's what it seems with our defense. If the intensity is there, that's what makes it go. It seems when our defense was bad and we struggled in that stretch, it didn't seem like the guys were too focused and too intense on defense. Speaking to one of their points about Syracuse going cold, we got a lot of options. We got Carter Williams, Trish, Sutherland, and C.J. Fair. 4 guys. We need 2 of those guys to score. 2 of those 4 to win a game. We need 2 of them to score 15 or more points, let's say. And so I like the odds of that happening. And, again, to beat this Michigan team, how many points do we need if the defense continues? 50, 60 points? If we can get 60, we're going to win. So you don't need to score every time. You just need to have a couple nice runs and make some free throws. Michigan was 7th in the Big Ten in defense, giving up 67 points a game. Indiana was 4th, giving up 62. So this is over a whole conference season of play. Indiana had a better defense than Syracuse, or than Michigan. And so I think that plays into our hands a little bit. And, finally, Michigan's new to this stage. It feels like it's been a while. Beeline hasn't been to a Final Four. The program hasn't been to a Final Four since the Fab 5 days. And I think that many Michigan fans feel like this is great. We're in the Final Four. I think a lot of Syracuse fans we're in the Final Four, and now we're going to win our second national title. So I just think taking all that into account, I really feel good about this game. I'm going to knock on wood real quick. And, with that, I suppose we'll take a quick 60-second break and hear from the sponsors that make this webcast possible. Trivia on the other side.
Attention Finger Lakes residents. Have you been injured and deserve compensation? Call Madej, Maris, and Ricky, your hometown personal injury attorneys. Your case deserves personal attention. At Madej, Maris, and Ricky, they know you by name, not just a number on a folder. Call the Finger Lakes Personal Injury Hotline at 315-568-0911. That's 315-568-0911. Madej, Maris, and Ricky, your hometown personal injury attorneys.
The Newark Pilots. See tomorrow's Major League stars today. For more information, go to newarkpilots.com.
The most valuable things are always passed down from generation to generation. It's true for your family, and it's true for our bank. For more than 140 years at Generations Bank, we've greeted you by name, planned with you for the future, and stood by you when you needed a hand. It's what we do, and what we'll continue to do for generations into the future. We might look different now, but in the important ways, we're exactly like we've always been. Stop in your local branch or go to mygenbank.com.
And welcome back to the Upstate Orange podcast. And now is the time when we do the trivia. Brad, what do you got for us this week on Connor's Corner?
Final Four Trivia, guys.
Nice, that's my favorite kind.
There have been 9 double-doubles in Syracuse history in the Final Four. How many of them can you name?
9 double-doubles.
I can name one.
Carmelo?
Derek Coleman in that
yeah.
that lost Indiana, I believe.
You talking about the semifinal round or any of the 2 games?
Semifinal, final, third-place game, if you will.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a hint. So, again, Brad, how many double-doubles are we looking for?
9 double-doubles in Syracuse history in Final Four games.
Well, Dave says Derek Coleman. I'm going to say Derek Coleman twice in the semis and the finals. Is that correct?
It's half correct. So he had one in the semis against Providence, but not in the finals.
He didn't score 10 points then because he had 19 rebounds or something, didn't he, in the
He
finals?
had 8 points in the finals of that game.
And 19 rebounds?
Yes.
And 25 missed foul shots.
No, just one very big one.
They did have a double-double in the semis, 12 and 12.
Okay, so there's one. We got Coleman. I'm going to say Carmelo Anthony had 2.
Well, you've got to guess John Wallace would be another in
Which
one.
game, Dave?
What's that?
In which game?
I'm going to say
In the finals.
I know he had that questionable foul that got him out of the game late.
Right. But he was having a big game. It's got to be the finals.
I would say finals.
Finals was correct. He only had 4 rebounds in the semis.
Against Mississippi State and Eric Dampier.
It was against Kentucky.
Okay, so we have 1, 2. Well, how about Carmelo? Did he have 2?
Carmelo had 2. He had both. He was 33 and 14 in the semis, 20 and 10 in the finals.
Okay, so we got 4.
Yep.
I'm going to say Akeem Warwick had 1.
No. He never had the rebounds.
Okay.
In 75, going back when they had that third place game, I have to try to remember some of the players.
Jimmy Lee.
How about the
Rudy
chief
Hackett?
How about the chief of police? Was that
Rudy Hackett. Let's say Rudy Hackett.
Rudy Hackett had one in the third place game.
good work?
So that's 5.
28 and 13
Wow.
In the third place game, though, unfortunately.
in the third place game.
So that's 5. We got 4 more.
Yep.
Well, let's go back to that 86-87 team, and I'm going to say that Sherman Douglas had one with the assists
Which game?
in the semis against Providence.
You're about 99% correct. He had one against Providence, but with rebounds.
Whoa, hey, that's
Sherman Douglas had 11 rebounds in that game.
he can be matched up against Billy Donovan too.
Yep.
Okay, so there's another one
Donovan was only 8 points, 7 assists in that game.
that's 6. Another example of Boeheim shutting down a top player in a big game.
Well, it's just amazing. We remember those teams.
Sure.
Maybe not all the specifics, and now you see those people. And
Yeah.
They're no longer youngsters.
Yeah.
And who would have thought that Pitino and Boeheim were there? Boeheim's still at Syracuse, obviously, and Pitino for all the different stops he's made. And here we are again.
Yep. Yeah, and a chance for Boeheim to face Pitino for a second time in a national title game, which is pretty interesting. And I don't think that Boeheim would let that happen. I don't think he would let this team lose to Pitino again. I just think he's so ultra competitive. Not that he has full control over these things, but I think he'll do everything in his power, of course.
Well, he's glowing now. He really is
Yeah.
glowing. And Jeremy mentioned, too, seeing him on,
PTI,
Yeah. And I guess he's a pretty funny guy, too, Boeheim, if you know him with his dry sense of humor.
Sure.
So who else?
We have 6. We have 6 of them. I'm going to stick with the 87 team and say Ronnie Cycli had one.
That's correct.
Very good.
And that would be in the semis against Providence.
That would not be correct. He had one in the finals.
Okay.
18 and 10 against Indiana.
Okay, so that's 7. That's got to be it for that team unless Stevie Thompson somehow got one. So I'm going to move ahead to the Wallace team.
Now, McNamara, any chance with assists? And he had the threes, obviously, against Kansas.
McNamara did not. He didn't have the assist. He had only 4 assists in the semis and only 1 assist in the finals.
Boy, he hit those threes. That was so sweet.
Oh, yeah, that was what gave us that cushion we needed to ride it out against a very talented Kansas team.
Carmelo has not exactly lost his scoring touch either, has he? He scored 90 points in the last 2 games.
Yeah, not this week. What about Lazarus Sims, points and assists?
No.
Okay, that was.
He almost did against Mississippi State. He had 11 points and 9 assists.
Oh, he would have made the list.
Are we leaving somebody off from that early 75 team?
Yes.
Okay, well, we got maybe
The 2 guys you're missing, one was from 75, the other was from 87.
And you got the general already.
Highly unlikely that, Jim, you would get the guy from 75. Dave, I don't know. It's pretty obscure, but I wouldn't put it past you.
So it's not Jimmy Lee then, because he's a guy. He was the star of that team.
Right.
Not Marty Burns.
That was
Marty Burns played 1 minute in that game.
He must have been a freshman that year.
it's hard to remember all the players.
You know, I it's on the tip of my tongue, but I don't want to waste our time here.
Yeah.
Brad, why don't you give us that guy from 75?
Chris Beast.
That wasn't what the name was on the tip of my tongue. Chris.
Oh, I didn't think it would be. He was 18-10 in the semis against Kentucky.
Chris, what was the last name?
Beast.
Beast?
Sease.
S-E-A-S-E. Cisse? Cisse?
If that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, I've seen the name printed before. But
Yeah.
you're right. Let's move to 87 then. So, you know who's on that team in 87? Rodney Walker. Remember
Rodney
him?
Walker did not get a double.
Yeah, it's not him, but I'm trying to think of some guys.
Pace, was he on that? No,
Pace would have been
Way
there,
after,
2003.
yeah.
Pace's father might have been on that team. Well, you got to go with Stevie Thompson. You got to say
what you just said, and you might be on the right track.
It's got to be Stevie Thompson.
No. Not a father, but an uncle.
Oh, Howard Trish. There you go. Yeah, that basically gave it away.
Yes.
Yeah, no kidding. Howard Trish had 12 and 11 against Providence.
Wow.
Yep, double for Trish.
I just wish his
We get another
arms were a
double-double
little
from Trish this
longer.
weekend.
Like Akeem work length.
Yeah.
All right, Brad, what else you got for us?
So we hope that, I guess we kind of hope that we might have a final Big East battle in the championship game on Monday night.
Nothing would be a better way to say goodnight, to send off the Big East. Nothing would be better.
Personally, I would think it would be better if Syracuse played Wichita State, but it would be nice if Syracuse played then another Big East team in the finals. But tell me the last time two Big East teams played against one another in the Final Four.
We're not going to go way back to Villanova, Georgetown. It's been since.
Syracuse Providence has done it since then.
Okay.
So it would be after that. I'm thinking it had to be one of the UConn teams. Must have matched up against a Big East team somewhere along the way. But maybe it is that Syracuse Providence game. Georgetown made it to the Final Four and played Ohio State. It probably, if anything, it was one of those UConn teams. But I'm going to say Syracuse Providence because I can't think of one time since then.
That's correct. Syracuse Providence, 87.
Wow. It's been that long.
Since then, that two Big East teams have made the Final Four, with the exception of this year, was in 2009. UConn and Villanova both made it, but then they both lost in the semis.
Yeah, I remember that. It was a tough one. So this would be unprecedented, really, and for Syracuse to face Louisville in the finals would be the first time since Georgetown Villanova. Don't you kind of feel like it's almost got to happen that way to write the final chapter of the Big East? On one end of it, you have Georgetown Villanova in one of the greatest finals ever, and then maybe end it with Patino versus Boeheim, Syracuse versus Louisville. Is the last game, or the last Big East basketball period.
And things. Patrick Ewing was the demon that, especially if you're from Syracuse, but.
Yep.
Every underdog, they were all against Georgetown, and especially Patrick Ewing, and I find him, as time has passed, very likable.
Yeah,
and,
I agree with you.
Finished reading The Dream Team, and of course he hooked up with Larry Bird. They nicknamed Patrick Ewing Harry. It was Larry and Harry.
Right.
And it's just funny how, as time goes on, and you reflect how things change.
Yeah, absolutely, and even the way that we might tolerate John Thompson, who now does radio. When I was younger, I hated the guy.
He had that towel. He officially closed Manley Fieldhouse, and actually, I got so I like his kid coaching, and he killed me in the bracket against and a lot of people this year. I was thinking Georgetown would face Louisville.
Hey, who wasn't? They were playing great. They had a great player in Otto Porter. Certainly wouldn't have thought they would have lost to Florida Gulf Coast. But.
Speaking of Carter Williams, And who among us didn't think, is this guy really a lottery pick? Well, he certainly has added some extra dollars to his draft status during this run, without question. And he can, no doubt, help repair or replace the home that his parents had damaged in that fire a couple of weeks ago.
If the insurance money doesn't come through, they'll wait for the draft.
Yep.
So what's your trivia question, Brad?
I got plenty.
Oh, we got a new one. We answered the last one. We're on to a new one.
Yep, next one. So if Syracuse and Louisville played in the finals, it would be two Big East teams against one another, which I would agree would be poetic justice for the end of the Big East as we know it. When was the last time two conference foes faced off for the national championship?
Is it recent history?
It was a Big 12 game.
Ohio State played Michigan many years ago.
This is
more recent than that.
More recent. It was a Big 12 game, wasn't it, Brad?
It was.
And it must have been Oklahoma and Kansas?
That's correct.
That's correct. Okay, I got you. Good
job.
I'm
Good job. You are. You're
1988 Danny Manning team.
Danny.
Mookie Blaylock for Oklahoma.
What was the nickname of that? Danny and the Juniors, or what did they call that team?
That sounds about right. Manning was unbelievable college player.
And a very good pro in spite of the
injuries,
the leg injury. Yeah.
All right, tell me who has the most points in any Syracuse Final Four game.
Are we counting the 75 season?
Yes, we are.
And so, I'm going to say Jimmy Lee. Nah, maybe not. I really don't know.
What is it, Jeremy? John Wallace.
John Wallace. A good guess, but no. Carmelo Anthony. He had 33 against Texas.
Oh, yeah, I should have known that right off the bat. Do you have the second and third there?
I could tell you. Yeah, I've got second and third.
And that would be Jerry McNamara be one of them?
No, not even close.
Jimmy Lee be one of them?
Might it be Carmelo more than once?
No, not Jimmy Lee, not Carmelo, but Jimmy Lee was close.
John Wallace?
John Wallace was second, 29 against Kentucky.
Wow.
That was a good guess. You weren't just being nice.
And so then we must have somebody on 87, and that would lead me to believe it would be Sherm.
No.
No?
It's from 75.
Oh, what about Hackett? Rudy Hackett, or that CC guy that you're talking about?
Rudy Hackett, 28.
Okay, there you go.
In the third place game.
Rudy.
Do you ever see the jerseys they wore in 75 for that Final Four? They were dark blue. Yeah, dark blue. Dark blue with orange and white lettering.
Yeah, how crazy is that?
So you can find a nice video of that on YouTube. Well, I don't know if you call it a nice video, but there's video footage of that game on YouTube. Just search 1976 final or 75 Final Four Syracuse.
How do you come up with all this
a lot of research,
data?
Dave. A lot of research.
A lot of time spent in the library thumbing through the old catalog, huh?
Yeah, I got the microfiche machine out.
Internet makes these things easier.
Who has the most points of any player in the Final Four in history?
Of any player?
Any player, Syracuse or non. And I will give
Final Four?
Syracuse.
It's got to be
Dollar Bill?
Bill Walton?
That's correct.
I was going to say Dollar Bill Bradley.
Oh, Bill Bradley.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, you got it.
In the semifinals.
Third
place game. Third place game.
Yeah. People used to rack up the stats in the third place games. 58 points Bill Bradley had for Princeton against Wichita State, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
An amazing American right there, Bill Bradley.
Bill Bradley.
Yep.
Who has the most rebounds in one game for Syracuse in the Final Four?
Coleman.
Of course.
19.
The most in history in any team in the Final Four.
Holy cow. Is this modern or ancient?
How about Olajuwon?
Not a bad guess. He's 6th, 7th on this list. He had 22 against Louisville in 83.
By the way, Brad, since you're asking us questions,
yeah.
Have you watched the 30 for 30 on the North Carolina State Championship?
No, I have it recorded, and I haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
Fantastic.
I can't tell you how tearful, how many times I became tearful watching that just tremendous show.
Yeah, I was never much of a Valvano fan, but
well, you would be,
sorry.
And also a fan of the players that made up that team.
I enjoyed those
great
players
story.
a lot. I remember that team. It was a good bunch of characters.
But I was the same way. I knew it came out. I knew I'd watch it eventually. But I was like, I know. I remember how that happened. He did the alley-oop, and he ran around looking for somebody to hug, and then they started the V Foundation. But there was so much about it leading up to that championship game in that Final Four.
Well, the reunions
yeah.
Of their players. And I'm trying to remember is it Thurl Bailey? One of them passed away.
Bailey. No, not
Charles did.
Lorenzo Charles.
Yeah, Lorenzo Charles, the guy who dunked it, the alley-oop at the end.
And they talk about Michael Jordan
But you get to see those Phi Slamma Jamma highlights too, which were incredible.
Drexler.
Yeah.
Great. I read a great profile just recently about Benny Anders. Do you remember him on the Houston teams?
I do not.
Great dunker. He had Jerry curls, and he was the sixth man for that Houston team, and he was, definitely a charter member of Phi Slamma Jamma. And as soon as he got kicked off the team at Houston, and he literally fell off the face of the earth, and people have been for years trying to find him. Where are they now, kind of thing. And he's completely gone underground. They haven't figured out if he died or if he went into witness protection or what happened to the guy.
Well, you got to watch that 30 for 30, Brad, when you get a chance.
Highly.
Well, I plan to.
They do a great job on those.
So what was the question again?
I don't even remember.
The most rebounds.
The most rebounds in history of the Final Four.
Ever.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know, is this pre or post?
It goes way back. It's before.
How about Wilt Chamberlain?
Not Wilt Chamberlain.
Bill Russell.
In fact, he's not even in the top 10.
George Mikan.
No, not George Mikan.
And not Bill Russell.
Oh. What's that?
Not Bill Russell?
Yes, it is Bill Russell.
Okay, Bill Russell.
William Felton Russell, USF.
Rebounds in 1956.
Not bad.
That's, by the way, I had tired of many of those AT&T commercials, but now with Jabbar, Magic, Larry Bird, and Russell, I'm sure you guys have seen those.
Yeah, that was fun. They threw that one out in the Marquette
yeah.
game, and you expected those kids, and then they pan back, and those big guys sitting in the seats.
Yeah.
So Brad, one more, because we got to move on here. One more question.
One more. All right. Here's one you probably. Here's one that was incredibly fascinating to me. I didn't even see this coming. When you think of national champions and you think of the teams they beat to get there, if you add up the seedings of the teams that champion has beaten, it stands to reason that the lowest number of aggregate seeds
Toughest road.
has the toughest road, right? You think, what team do you think had the toughest road? If you think back to any of the champions, probably in the last, go back 30 years.
Not just Syracuse, anybody.
Anybody.
I think a couple of them have been Syracuse.
Well, did you reference one of the star players? Did we talk about that a few minutes ago? Danny Manning in Kansas?
That's not a bad guess. They're not on that list. They're probably 7th or 8th on that list because they were a 6th seed.
I know we faced more top seeds in the finals than many others. Every single one of our finals game has been a blockbuster.
Yeah.
So I honestly believe that we have 2, maybe even 3 of the top 10 of all time are Syracuse.
The list I have only relates to champions. So to win the championship, which Syracuse has done once,
Okay.
the teams that they beat to get there. So think of all the champions going back, which would have had the toughest road.
Well, I still think that 2003 team played, had a tough road. They beat a lot of low seeds.
You're right. So they're 3rd on this list.
Okay.
That's Syracuse.
Very good, Jim.
Yeah. So they beat they were a 3 seed that year. They beat a 14 in the first round, obviously.
Montana State.
Beat a 6 and then a 10, and then they beat a 1 seed
Oklahoma State.
Oklahoma, and then a 1
Oklahoma.
Texas.
Texas.
And Kansas was a 2 seed.
2 seed. And Auburn was
Auburn was the 10 seed.
10
so
seed.
they actually they would have been higher on this list had Auburn not won the 7-10 game.
Yeah.
Whoever the 7 seed was, had Auburn lost to that team, Syracuse would be second on this list.
So there's 2 higher than Syracuse, and to be honest with you, I have little to no idea who they are.
Nova.
Villanova. Oh, Villanova.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a fantastic answer. Yeah.
Yeah, because they were an 8 seed, so they beat the 9. Then they beat a 1 seed in the second round. If I remember right, it might have even been North Carolina. And then they beat a 5 seed, and then a 2, and Georgetown a 1.
What about Arizona?
Arizona, they're not far behind. They beat 2 1 seeds in the finals, and they beat a 1 seed in the Sweet 16.
They were a 4 seed that won it.
Seed in the Elite 8 and a 12 seed in the second round.
Well, okay, who is it?
Well, they're the best. And second's North Carolina in '93. They beat 2 2 seeds, a 1 seed, and a 4 seed.
Who was the number 1, Brad, by the way? We couldn't hear you.
I said, what's that? I said North Carolina's the next.
And who was the number 1? Villanova, North Carolina, Syracuse.
Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of interesting.
So that was surprising when I saw it. It's a difficult trivia question, but it was fascinating when I read that Syracuse had the 3rd toughest road of any team since they've gone to 64 teams, any champion.
Well, great trivia as usual, Brad. We've, as usual, run a little bit behind schedule here. I want to touch on a few more points before we head out of here. I'm not going to talk about the Kevin Ware injury. That's been played out. This is kind of a Syracuse podcast. I feel bad for the kid. I'm not going to talk about Mike Rice and what happened at Rutgers because I think we can all concur that was kind of ridiculous. But what do you expect from Rutgers? Rutgers, here's a school that we've competed head-to-head with for 25 years, and every single one of those years we've had the upper hand on them. So, I laugh when I hear that Rutgers is going to the Big Ten, So
Rutgers finally has some media attention during Final Four week, so give them credit for that.
That's a good one. There you go.
Was it Rutgers who defeated the Bob Lanier Bonaventure team when Bob Lanier got hurt way back when? St. Bonaventure made the Final Four.
It may have been.
And I think Rutgers
70, but Rutgers wasn't in there.
Oh, okay.
If Bonaventure might have beaten them to get to the Final Four. Rutgers was in the Final Four in 76.
Okay.
Well, also not going to talk about Mike Hopkins, who did not take or get offered the USC or UCLA jobs. Apparently, Pat Hayden in USC wants to hire some guy named Enfield.
It is that Georgetown essentially saved Mike Hopkins for us.
How so?
By losing to Florida Gulf Coast.
Oh yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Although I'm not sure if Hopkins was going there or not, but again, not too much time to get into that right now. I'm going to keep this focused on the task at hand, which is the Final Four, and I really want to kind of wrap things up tonight talking again about Jim Boeheim. How even just a few weeks ago, people were questioning as he won his 900th game if he was elite. Good but not great is what Gottlieb said. What a joke. And I looked here at the 4 Final Four runs that we made because it's a microcosm kind of his career and his coaching ability. And I don't think you'll find a coach, whether it's Krzyzewski or Roy Williams or Bobby Knight, that is as adaptable as Boeheim, and he does it in a way that you don't really. I don't even think I noticed. But in 1987, we were Showtime. We were running and gunning. We had tons of talent, and it was just high-scoring games, and a lot of man-to-man defense back then too. And that's what got it done in '87. In '96, that was kind of Boeheim's lucky one, Wallace obviously was a huge component to that, and it was Wallace and a bunch of role players.
And they had a shot against Kentucky in that game.
Which was a team with 7 future NBA players on the roster. So that year, was kind of the one that you think of all the bad breaks Syracuse has had with great teams. That year we got some breaks, obviously.
The Cuse is in the house.
So that was 96. 2003, Boeheim employed an incredible full-court press that literally helped us beat a couple teams along the way, including Oklahoma State.
And wasn't that team unranked when the season started?
Yeah, they were unranked national champs. They were also receiving votes in a preseason poll.
They were young. They had 2 freshmen in the starting lineup.
Right.
Nobody knew what to expect.
But that was the first year that Boeheim ever had, really had a great press. That press was fantastic with Jeremy McNeil on the back, and they would go to that when that team got down more than 10 points multiple times in that tournament and went to that press, and during the season. And it seems like they could be extra aggressive in the one side of the court, because if they broke it, Jeremy McNeil was there to save the day at the rim, and that was a unique press that Boeheim crafted for that team. He doesn't use that press anymore. He doesn't do it like that anymore. And now here we are in 2013, and it's a complete 360. He's gotten us to the Final Four by playing slow down defensive basketball, half court, slow down defensive basketball. I mean, that's really what he's done. And you just got to look at the final scores to see it. And so, how can you not give this guy credit as being one of the greatest coaches of all time, not only because of the win totals, but just pay attention to what he's done,
Well, I think Jay Billis, who I mentioned earlier, is probably, if you took a poll of college fans, would say he's the most respected commentator going or analyst going these days.
Yep.
And he has the highest regard for Coach Boeheim's abilities. And longevity is one thing and success is one thing, and you combine the two. He's had a remarkable career, and he has his detractors, but he will be missed much more than people, at least I think so, people realize when he does ultimately retire, which I think will come in about a year.
After 1 year in the ACC?
A year or maybe 2.
Yeah.
I hope he sticks around and gets 1,000 wins myself, but we shall see.
He's got a way of maximizing his team's assets and hiding the team's weaknesses.
And he ought to be, his recruiting class for next year, I guess, is supposed to be pretty good. And, of course, this run will not at all dampen the possibility of getting some more blue chippers.
That's right. Brad, tell us, is Boeheim belong in the discussion for the greatest college basketball coach of all time? Does he belong in that discussion?
He's in the conversation. I mean,
would we all agree Wooden, though, is off by
John
himself?
Wooden. I mean, I think we can all agree to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just that's like from another time. It's like comparing, Ty Cobb with even Pete Rose. You can respect what they both had done, number-wise.
Well, it's kind of like Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth had more home runs than many of the teams had for different years. And but Wooden aside, Krzyzewski's getting the most notoriety, I would say, in this generation.
Yes.
But Boeheim and Coach Calhoun and Pitino.
Not Calhoun.
Well, I think number of championships plays into it, too.
Bobby Knight.
Well, we should have this conversation a week from now, because that may be a different conversation than we're having right now.
Very good.
Calhoun's got 3 and Boeheim's got 1, and like it or not, that puts him in a higher echelon.
Yeah.
It's like that second hole-in-one I want to get, Jim. It's like
I've got 2.
You do.
I'm in another echelon than you.
That's right. That's the way I look at like the majors. When a guy gets a major in golf, he wants at least that second one.
That's why it's such an opportunity here. We're in the Final Four. With the greatest teams that we've had recently, we haven't gotten to the Final Four, and here we are. We got to win this. They got to win it for Boeheim. 2 wins.
Well, they talk about the Syracuse length, and I know in person, Louisville is not their guards, but their inside players are massive. They are big.
Yeah.
But, 2 stories on you covered. You touched on some of the coaches' hirings and 2 things. One story that was big this week that got minimized a little is the Ed Rush story, the official for the Pac-10. I can't believe that will go away, especially the way things came down in that Sean Miller, Arizona final loss to UCLA.
Yeah, it doesn't seem fair, does it?
And the other thing, when this relates a little bit to Jim Boeheim, I think his former assistant may have a big financial last laugh in his lawsuit, maybe months, maybe a couple of years.
Bernie Fine, yeah.
Against ESPN.
Yep.
That's kind of a back burner story right now, but stay tuned.
I mean, I've always said with the Bernie Fine situation that I felt he was in the closet, that he wasn't a child molester. He was just a gay man in a position where he couldn't be openly gay. And, I think I just would say to people who assume that he was a child molester, which doesn't make sense to me given the facts in this situation and the people that have come to his defense. And if he wasn't, then ESPN ruined his life. So
I think they're going to be paying with more than a few zeros to Mr. Fine at some point. We may not know. That might be.
Never will know.
But I think that lawsuit will.
It hits court. I think they settle out of keep it out of court, keep it out of the media.
That would probably be what ESPN would do, sure. But maybe Bernie Fine is like, I don't want to settle. I want to hit you guys where it hurts the way you hit me. Of course, at the whole end of the day, you're not going to damage ESPN's viability, going forward. But it would be for Bernie Fine, I'm sure, some
validation.
Validation is more than revenge. What can you do? It's a scarlet letter type of situation for Bernie Fine.
But your man, back to the story with Boeheim, he's always, I think the last half dozen years or so, of course the national title was a springboard for him, most exercising some of the demons from that Indiana loss and all that. But it's pretty hard to argue with the success he's had year after year after year.
Nobody else does. Maybe two or three other coaches.
And Krzyzewski, who we mentioned, who does he tab to help him in the Olympics? Is Jim Boeheim.
Oh, sure, yeah. So, there you go. You have yourself the dream coaching team to go with the dream team. And that's another reason you got to give Boeheim respect is the way that the NBA superstars talked about being coached by Jim Boeheim. So, all these Boeheim bashers, and I hear it on social media, in my circle of friends, and I hear it in the actual media from guys like Doug Gottlieb, and I hear it walking down the street, or I hear it in the Carrier Dome. Boeheim, he's got to do this, or of course, you watch this, Boeheim's going to slow it down now, they're going to lose, or, give me a break. Give me a break. We are so lucky to have had Jim Boeheim.
No doubt.
We wouldn't be sitting here having this podcast.
I'll tell you, the color orange has greatly benefited in Central New York by Coach Boeheim's teams.
And living here in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region, we're recording this podcast about 15 miles, 20 miles from Lyons. How far do you think we are?
15 miles, maybe.
Yeah, from the birthplace of Jim Boeheim, that somebody would come out of Lyons, play in the local high school leagues that still exist against the teams, and then spend his entire career after that at Syracuse. I get a little offended when I talk to a resident of this area that is anti-Boeheim. Like, what, are you kidding me? It's like biting the hand that feeds you type of situation.
I guess, success breeds a lot of contempt from different people. So
I suppose, but I remember back in the 80s when Boeheim there was talk of him maybe getting fired. And there was talk about him maybe going to the Washington Bullets or maybe going to Ohio State. And a lot of Syracuse fans were like, yes, this is so great. Who are we going to get? You know who I want? Tom Penders. You know, that was a name I remember getting mentioned. Is Tom Penders might come to coach Syracuse.
Well, it's the Flavor of the Month Club,
That's
just
right.
like the fellow from Florida Gulf Coast who he's had a remarkable life in many, many fashions. But
2 games.
as I heard one analyst say, if you compare resumes with, this is Steve Alford, who was the hire at UCLA, with Ben Howland's, the only area in which Alford exceeds over Howland is with her hairline. So,
yeah, and again, like you mentioned, Enfield. It's par for the course. You know, USC has made terrible hires, and so has Rutgers. Before Mike Rice, it was Fred Hill, who was ousted after getting on umpire at a Rutgers baseball game from the stands. And before him, it was Bannon, who used to make his players run naked sprints in practice.
fully naked?
You know, I don't know.
Ridiculous.
So this is
I do not want to check YouTube for that.
So USC basketball is the Rutgers basketball of the West, I guess. So I just feel bad for Hopkins. I feel glad for Syracuse, though. And I think you're right, Dave. You know, a couple more years for Boeheim. But Rick Pitino says that Boeheim's going to outlast us all.
Well, Patino's showing a little wear and tear, and of course,
Yeah, well, he's had
his run-ins.
Yeah,
too.
he's been put through the ringer the past few years.
But I have
legally.
I do say, you know, and I've been a harsh critic. There's reasons I don't like him, but he certainly managed things very well with all that went on with the injury and everything, and to his player.
Yeah.
In that Duke game, I give him his due for that.
Yeah, and so Brad, let's say you are an athletic director at your alma mater, let's say Wake Forest, your grad school, and you have a coaching hire, and Boeheim and Pitino are both available. And let's take age out of the picture. Let's just say that you're confident the guy you hire is going to give you 5 years to rebuild that program. Who? Not that they need that much rebuilding, but we got to admit the Demon Deacons need a little rebuilding. Who do you choose?
That's a tough question. I think both guys bring a lot to the table. I think to me it took Jim Boeheim a long time to perfect his system. I think we're there now. I think Pitino gets a program revitalized more quickly. I think he did that at Louisville. When he came to Louisville, they weren't. I mean, they were good. They've always been good.
Who was his predecessor?
I don't even know.
Denny Crum.
It wasn't Denny Crum, though. There must have been somebody in between.
No, I can't even think.
There had to be.
Yeah. I don't remember now. Maybe there wasn't.
Jeremy, any ideas? Huh.
But they've languished for a while, and Pitino got there, and all of a sudden, they rose back up. I remember when he came to Kentucky, same thing. They were on probation. They were as low as it could get. And
but he chooses his spots too. I think he didn't have as much success in New York or Boston.
Yeah, he's not an NBA guy. He's a college guy. Period.
But I think
there's the ego getting in the way to say, I've done it in college. I can do it at the highest level. But some guys are just better suited for college.
And perhaps Pitino's greatest coaching job was the Providence team.
True.
So, that's a tough question. I'm fond of Rick Pitino's coaching style, and those two are linked because Boeheim gave him his first job, assistant job, and he sat on the bench of the Carrier Dome, for Syracuse as an assistant coach, and then not too shortly after that, within 6 years, he was bringing a Providence team there as an opposing head coach. So that's just an interesting question to ponder. You'll never hear me say I'll take Pitino over Boeheim. I'll take Boeheim. I just think that
why would you no?
Just because Boeheim doesn't go crazy on the sideline and veins aren't popping out of his head.
Sidelines.
Yeah.
Patino's on the court.
Yeah.
At least he was at Syracuse. So I think he could have shot a 3-pointer if they gave him the ball.
Same thing with Buzz Williams. They are on the court. Remember when they had the coaching box? You guys remember that? They didn't stick with that. They used to actually have the actual box drawn over
Right.
there, and you couldn't leave. If you left, it was a technical, no questions asked. It was kind of like a zero tolerance policy that must have been in like the early 90s, Brad.
Yeah, I didn't ever hear that they officially did away with it, but
Right.
I mean they don't adhere to it anymore by any means.
So I wanted to ask Brad, because we really haven't mentioned Wichita State very much. Is there any chance at all that they could actually spring that huge upset?
You know, I think where Louisville is vulnerable right now is in their backcourt if either Siva or Smith gets in foul trouble. If Wichita can attack those guys on defense and get one of those guys with 3 fouls early and, you know, have them sit in the first half, because without Kevin Ware, their first option off the bench in the backcourt's a walk-on. And so I think that's where they're vulnerable. And, you know, a lot has been made about Kevin Ware in the last week, rightly so. He brought a lot to the table in terms of backcourt depth, and that could be a problem for them. And, you know, otherwise, I mean, Wichita's going to have to play, you know, a close to perfect game.
But my take is, yes, of course. I mean, they're in the Final Four, and it's a 40-minute college basketball game. Anything can happen. You know, I say how confident I am against Syracuse over Michigan, but you know, that doesn't mean that things don't change once the game starts. You know, even in that Indiana game early on, Indiana missed a couple corner threes that were kind of their best shots maybe they had all game, and they missed them. If they make them, maybe it's a different game. So I think anything can happen. I would take Louisville, you know, 9 times out of 10, but that 1 time out of 10 still's out there. And Brad, you said that you know, want Wichita State to beat Louisville so Syracuse might have an easier potential final game. I really want that Louisville-Syracuse game. I really feel that is the proper way to close out the Big East. And so bring it on. You know, obviously I hope Syracuse can win that game. It would be a more difficult matchup than Wichita State. But remember, we were up 16 points on this Louisville team after after about 30 minutes of play.
Yeah, I think about 17 minutes left in the game is when everything
so
started.
23 minutes, we outscored them by 16, and we were coming off 4 straight games. Now it's kind of more of an even type of footing if we were to meet them in the finals. And like I said, I don't think Jim Boeheim's going to let Pitino beat him twice in a national title game.
Well, that exercising those demons again. They took care of Marquette, Pittsburgh, and Georgetown, so this would be the one. But I'm not as selfish as you, Jim. I don't care if even they win by forfeit in the championship game. I would just love to see Syracuse get the national title. Boeheim getting his second one, but it's just it's been awesome so far, and I'm not ready for it to end quite yet.
Yeah, and there really is only one way it can end. With us being happy, and that would be to win 2 more games. And it's a lot easier to get over a loss in the second or third round, as frustrating as it is. You kind of look outside in the sunshine, and you might think about maybe going and playing a little golf. But
it hasn't shined much.
That's right.
The only sunshine has come from Syracuse.
So thank goodness we've had this run.
Late winter.
If you lose in the Final Four or the national title game, as I've experienced as a Syracuse fan, you don't live that down ever. You remember it forever. You remember Keith Smart, and you remember John Wallace fouling out, and you'll never forget it. So that's what's at stake this weekend.
Right on.
And with that, guys, I think we're going to put a wrap on this thing, as we are just at this point about how many hours away from tip? About 48 hours from tip.
Yeah, 46 and a half.
46 and a half hours till Syracuse takes the court in the Final Four in Game 2 on Saturday night. We'll be back next Thursday night for our final show of the season. Dave, you're always welcome to come back, and Matt Verke will be back, as he is
thank you.
Currently driving back from Myrtle Beach.
Might have to make Masters predictions then, too.
we'll transition right into golf season. But hopefully we'll be talking about a Syracuse national title. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us on the Upstate Orange podcast. You can subscribe to our feed on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or RSS, so you'll be sure to see us when we come back next season. For my co-host, Brad Connor, for Dave Barnick, and for Matt Verkuse on the road, our producer, Jeremy Hunt, I'm Jim Sinicropi. Let's bring home that elusive national title to Syracuse. Our time is now!